and I'm here on Dewees Island where our live feeder cam is. I started a live video a second ago, but I wasn't sure if the phone was crooked or not, so if there's any technical difficulties, let me know. Today we're going to talk more about our Grackle saga. So if you tuned in last month, we were trying to solve the Grackle problem that we're having on our feeders out here on Dewees. And we did a few things, so we're going to talk about what we saw and what we learned and our new game plan. And then I'm also going to go over a few things for the fall that you might want to keep in mind. So after we talk through our feeders out here, we'll go over some good fall information for you guys to keep in mind too. So our feeders out here on Dewees are for our live feeder cam, which is on YouTube all the time. We keep it running at the store, and it was really cool during the summer because we got a lot of painted buntings, and then after that, some Grackle started taking over, and they're actually pretty entertaining to watch on TV, but they're really messy, and they eat all the food, and they don't leave much space for other birds to come and feed. So we're trying to kind of get them under control. The last time we were here, if you guys watched our video, we tweaked some things. So we caged feeders, we put safflower out, we gave the Grackles their own feeder, and we tried to put up a couple of feeders that maybe the Grackles would have a harder time with. So some of these things we knew for sure were gonna work, and some of them was just, we'll try it and see. And what we noticed right away, if you tuned in after we did our Grackle intervention, is what we called it, after we did all of that, a few days there was no birds, which is totally normal. So just so you guys know, anytime you change up the feeders or food at your feeder in your yard, your bird feeders, or you put new food out, there's always a learning curve there for the birds, and they take a little bit to come back and get used to it. They're just funny like that. Sometimes it happens faster than others. So it was probably about 3 or 4 days where there was very little activity at the feeders. But after that, because we keep it on at the store all the time, we were able to watch. We saw painted buntings coming back into the feeders, which they're pretty much gone now. But painted buntings were coming back in the feeders. There was house finches back in there. A lot of birds started coming and visiting again. Well, shortly after that, and the Grackles were enjoying their own feeder, which we gave them as hopefully a distraction. But the Grackles were jealous, I guess, so they started going to all the feeders that are on our feeder cam and finding creative ways to pick up the food from the feeders that are more challenging for them to get into. And they even started eating the safflower some from the tray. They don't care for safflower, and that's not very common that they really go for the safflower seed. But in general, this fall has been a great it's been a great fall for birds at the bird feeders. So your yard might have slowed down as far as bird activity goes just a little bit, and that's really normal for the fall. But as a retail store who helps hundreds of people feed the birds every single week, we can tell for sure that the general in the area is that there's better bird activity at the feeders this fall than there's been in a really long time. So usually when we see that happening, we just kind of associate that with maybe that there's less natural food out there for the birds, so they eat more at the feeders. And because of that, it would also make sense that the Grackles would eat something that they don't normally care for so much. But all that to say, the cage feeders worked great. That was a really good solution. So what we're going to do is cut the Grackles off completely. And it's not that we don't like Grackles. They're actually really cool birds. It's just that they take over the feeding stations in such large numbers, and our smaller birds don't get a chance to come to the feeders, and we're definitely not going to see a good variety of birds when the Grackles are all over the feeders. So we're going to take down the Grackle feeder. Their tray feeder filled with all those delicious goodies is going to come down, and they're not going to have that feeder anymore. The tray feeder that's on our live cam, we're going to take that down as well, because even though we just had safflower seed in it, it's just a great landing pad for them. It helped them get to the feeders that were more challenging for them. And so that wasn't working out so great. They were still picking out things that they could, or anything that fell into that tray. So we're gonna take that tray down, we're not going to have the tray on the feeder system anymore. We're going to leave up our caged tube feeder, and we're going to leave up our caged dinner bell feeder. So only caged feeders, which the grackles cannot get in. That will stop them. We're also going to give those 2 feeders about 2 weeks before we add any other feeders or even put safflower back out in an open tray. We usually recommend giving your feeders about 2 weeks to get, I see people tuning in. Hi, Kathy and Mark. We're going to give those feeders a little bit of time for the grackles to realize they can't get into it and hopefully move on and find another feeding station to flock up at. So that's what we're gonna do now. I know we're a little bummed here. Judy's a little bummed. She really wants to get her other birds back, but you can't get a lot of birds when you have the grackles taking over. And so giving the feeders about a 2-week break where we only have the caged feeders out there should really help discourage the grackles, and hopefully we can start introducing new foods and getting a bigger variety of birds again. So that's gonna be our game plan. I might film that after this, but or I might not. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was fall at your own feeders. So hopefully you're not having this crazy grackle problem that Judy's having. Honestly, she just lives on the marsh and it's so beautiful, but it's also the perfect habitat for grackles, so they really tend to take over in areas like this. But in your yard, a couple of things we want to talk about. So hummingbirds, orioles, and just fall feeder activity in general. So the first thing I'm going to mention is hummingbirds. Not sure if any of you guys are still seeing hummingbirds at your feeders. More and more have started to stick around throughout the winter time. So we want to encourage you to actually leave up your feeder if you don't mind and it's not too much work for you, because when the hummingbirds do stick around throughout the winter, they'll really appreciate that steady food source as the natural food sources dwindle down. So about this time of year, sometimes I like to switch over to something a little bit smaller. The hummingbird activity is definitely less right now, but the smaller one, you know, you don't have to change the nectar out so much because it's smaller. But anyways, keeping your hummingbird feeder out will not keep the birds from migrating. A lot of other factors go into migration, and it's not just the food source. So don't be afraid to keep your hummingbird feeder out or feel like you need to take it down so that the birds will migrate. That is not necessarily, or that is not the case. And in fact, as we get our first freezes and things like that, they really will appreciate a reliable food source into the winter. So please let us know on our Facebook page if you're seeing hummingbirds still, or if you get them to stick around throughout the winter, as more and more people are. So our hummingbird feeder will probably go back up here on our live feeder cam shortly. The grackles don't usually mess with it, but we're gonna wait that 2-week period before we put the hummingbird feeder up. So anyways, put your hummingbird feeders up, but don't be afraid to do that. It's not gonna keep them from moving on. The next thing I wanted to talk about is orioles. So this is an oriole right there, Baltimore orioles. They're beautiful birds, and they really like to eat grape jelly and oranges. And we have had lots of reports of orioles. So I guess it was probably about a month or 2 ago, we got early reports, and the orioles seemed like they were off to a really great start, but then it seemed to slow down some, which is kind of normal. We usually get our first wave coming through as they're migrating, and then we'll get the ones that stick around throughout the winter time. So if you had them and then they left you, don't be discouraged about that. If you had your feeder out but the bees took over it, so you took it down, don't worry, you'll still have time to attract the orioles. They're here until April. So go ahead and put your oriole feeder back out if you did take it down, because this is the time of year for them and it only gets busier from now until they leave. So one of my favorite oriole feeders is this one. It's really cool because it has a little place to put the grape jelly, which is pretty much their favorite food. You can also put an orange here on the middle, and they also drink a nectar similar to hummingbird nectar. You can use your hummingbird nectar, but technically for orioles it should be slightly more diluted. So instead of 1 part sugar to 4 parts water, it would be 1 part sugar to 6 parts water. And you still want to change it out about twice a week because the weather's still warm during the day. So this is one of my preferred oriole feeders. This one's just really easy to fill and clean. It also has bee guards that can go in the ports here to keep bees out of the nectar. So even though that doesn't keep them off your jelly and your oranges, you can always remove the jelly and oranges if bees are still a problem and let the orioles drink from the nectar part. So your oriole feeders should definitely go out now. We've had lots of reports. Don't be discouraged if you don't see them right away. Just keep your feeder up and full, and then hopefully you'll see your first one. My mother-in-law, the first time she put hers up, she didn't get them the first season until the very end. I think it was in April, and she had her first oriole. And it was a little discouraging that first season, but once they knew her feeder was there and the next seasons to come, they kind of found it a lot faster. So again, it's just one of those things that takes a little bit of time. Also, last year, we had really good oriole activity on our regular bird feeders. That's one of the reasons we really like to promote no mess bird food in our store. It's not just the mess, it's also attracts a bigger variety of birds that would normally eat seeds. So another good reason to use the no mess blend. Which, speaking of our no mess blend, we have our winter blend back in. So this is our winter super blend, and it is extremely nutritional for the birds. It's the highest fat, highest protein seed that we carry right now. If you look close at it, it's got a lot of good nuts, some fruit, suet nuggets, Nutrisaf, all of this put together to give the birds the really highest fat, highest protein, best nutritional food that they can get right now. And I know that it seems a little silly to put something out with so much fat and protein. It's not that we get long, freezing cold nights or anything. But aside from the cold, it does get dark earlier, which means the birds have less time to look for food. So it's not just the temperatures, it's also the lack of daylight that has them needing the most nutrition that they can get from their food when they do get their food. So also, the birds are funny. They're just like people. I mean, they know when a food is better for them, it's a better source of food than, you know, a cheap off-brand food. And they'll come to that feeder more than they will a food with a lower quality, I don't know what I'm trying to say, like a lower quality nutritional valued food. So anyways, that's our winter blend. It's really popular. It also comes in a cute bag, so it's great for Christmas gifts too. And the winter blend is going to go in our cage tube feeder here on Dewees Island. So we're going to trade that out when you look later on our live cam on YouTube. It will have our winter blend in it instead of just the millet. Judy hasn't seen any buntings lately, so we're going to go ahead and switch on over to that winter super blend. And then inside the dinner bell, we're going to do the winter super blend cylinder. So if you used our seed cylinders before and you come in to try the winter super blend, I think you'll be really impressed with it. It's got a lot of weight to it because it's just a solid, packed full seed cylinder. It lasts a lot longer than your regular seed. The birds pick off each food that they want. And one of the reasons we're not using two different types of food right now in our two feeders that we're keeping out on Dewees is just that these particular blends have such a great variety of ingredients that you don't need to put out 10 different types of loose bird food. I would love to be able to put out suet right now and bark butter bits and all that fun stuff, but with the Grackles here on the live cam, we just can't do that yet. But on that note, even though fall is a slower time at the feeders, it's really important to keep your feeders full and clean because the birds will check out the feeders even if they're not eating at them on a regular basis, and they'll come to know that your feeders are a reliable source for food. So when the temperatures do start dropping and the days do get shorter and they need that food a little bit more than they need it now, they will remember your yard and you'll have better bird activity in the winter if you keep your feeders full and maintained. So make sure that you're doing that. I think that most of us will see a pretty good increase in bird activity as we get that cold front coming through this weekend. I'm really not looking forward to that freezing weather, but it will be nice to have a little bit of a change, I guess, and better activity at the bird feeders. Let's see what else I was going to talk about. Oh, one other thing I did want to mention, and you've probably seen us posting, actually we just did a post today about blue jays caching. So you might see chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, and blue jays going to the feeders, taking the food away. You might see them kind of pecking at the bark on your tree and kind of wondering what they're doing. And while they woodpeckers will look under the bark for food and stuff, but a lot of times right now what they're actually doing is caching away their food for the winter. So they'll find a little piece of bark or a hole or I don't know, any place where they can squeeze a seed or a nut, and they'll store it there for the winter time, which is really cool. I'm not sure that they remember to find all their seeds come winter, or that the squirrels don't find them first, but they can hide hundreds of seeds a day. So that's a pretty cool activity that's taking place right now. So it's just something neat to look out for when you're watching your birds pick the feeders off and fly away. They really could be storing the seed instead of eating it. So that's pretty cool. I really appreciate you guys tuning in today and learning a little bit about what's going on in the fall and what we're going to do here at the feeders on Dewees. In a second, I'm going to kind of show you the view because there's so many beautiful birds out here right now before I change out the feeders. But I appreciate you guys tuning in today. If I seemed a little out of it or tired, we were at the store until midnight last night, flipping it over for the holidays, getting all of our Christmas trees up and our new fun products that we get in just for the holidays. And so the store's looking really great. We're not quite done yet, but we should be by the weekend. So we worked hard on it, and I think you guys will love it. So I hope if you don't have anything to do this weekend, you'll swing on by the store and say hey, even if you don't need anything. Don't forget that our customer appreciation coupon is still good right now. We appreciate you guys truly every single day. You don't even know how much y'all support means to small business, but we sent out a special coupon for you guys, and if you didn't get it or you lost it, you can just mention this video and I'm sure we can find one behind the register for you, so don't be shy about that. And all right, so I'm gonna pick up the phone now and I'm gonna flip it around and kind of show you guys this view. It is so beautiful out here. Can you imagine if this was your porch? It's just amazing. You have to take a ferry here, which is, well, if you're like me and you're late for everything, that's not the best way to have to get around. But once you get on the ferry, it's just chill time, and then you get to the island and it's beautiful and it's so worth it. And I'm gonna come over here. There's a wood stork out there. I don't know if you guys can see, and I don't think I can zoom in if I'm live, but anyway, so beautiful. Even on a foggy day, it just looks amazing. So I'm going to put the phone down and probably just put it on the feeders as I disassemble and put up the stuff that we're going to want to keep up. But that's all really for my tips and advice and information. So you don't have to stay tuned in, but I'm going to just leave the phone on as I redo our feeder station here. All right, thanks, y'all. So this was the bark butter feeder we were hoping they couldn't cling on to, but they would perch on there and find a way. They're so desperate. So it's coming down. We're right on the saltwater too, and so like with all of us, your pole system eventually could get a little rusty. Every once in a while, maybe once or twice a year, depending on how salty your area is. We're right here on the marsh. I like to kind of take some black powder coat paint and touch up any pieces that are getting rusty, just to help your pole system last a little bit longer. They are really made really well, but the salt air is just hard on everything. So if you ever do have to disassemble your feeder, take a 2-week break because of the grackles. Feel free to use that time to kind of touch up your pole system. That way you get more life out of it. One of the reasons I'm taking the tray off instead of just leaving it empty is because I think it kind of gives them just a little bit of like false hope, and they're still using it as a landing pad, and really we just want it to be very not Grackle friendly at all. So I'm going to go ahead and take the tray down, that way they don't think anything's in there for them or land on it anymore. And also, like I said with the pole, I'm going to use that same opportunity to take out the mesh bottoms and maybe touch them up a little bit with some powder coat. Just kind of emptying out that old seed to freshen it up with our winter blend. If you guys have an old-fashioned tube feeder where you have to use the screws, I'm telling you the quick clean is the way to go. You just pop that off, and then you can just rub the base with the tube and then pop the bottom back on, and it's clean, it's easy. I'm not gonna do a deep clean with them right now because they're not that dirty, but if I did, I mean, I would just be cleaning it out with a bleach solution and being able to click that bottom off. It's a really nice feature. Gonna put the base back on here. And I'm gonna get our winter blend to fill that tube feeder up with. If you guys are just kind of checking in here, I kind of already went over our new game plan for our Grackle intervention here at our live feeder cam on Dewees, and now I'm just kind of implementing that plan. And make sure you go back a little bit and check out the rest of the video, because I talked about some fall birding information as well, backyard bird feeding information. That was interesting, so make sure you go back and check on that. I swear, this winter blend looks so good you could eat it. It looks so delicious. Kind of smells good too. Nuts, fruit, seeds, all that delicious stuff going right into this tube feeder here. The bottom's on nice and tight. Just gonna slide the lid over. All right, so this is 1.5 inch mesh on this tube feeder here. If you missed our last live video last month, this 1.5 inch mesh will not let grackles in. Unfortunately, it won't let cardinals in either, so they're just kind of out of luck until we solve our grackle problem. But honestly, they weren't coming around really anyways because they didn't want to compete with the grackles. So, so this feeder's going up, no cardinals, but we'll get all of our smaller birds can still fit in here. So the next thing I'm going to do is put our winter blend cylinder into the dinner bell. And if you've never done cylinders on your dinner bell before, you really should, because they're amazing. And I'm going to put the cage on because, again, we're cutting those grackles out completely. They're just a pain in our butt and we don't want them anymore. So if you've never done your cylinders on your dinner bell before, you basically just take your bottom off the dinner bell, which is like a screw, and just drop it on there. So it's super easy. And feeding your birds the cylinders lasts a lot longer than feeding them the loose seed, as I already mentioned, because they basically just pick off the food that they want, and they're not tossing things out or picking through to find their favorite seed. So it's just a really easy, clean way to feed the birds. This setup is also one that we usually recommend if people have a problem with mice or rats or they live in a condo, because it's a really, really clean way to feed the birds as well. Alright, so we've got our cage tube feeder and our cage dinner bell feeder. And that's the only feeders that we're going to have out here for now. I'm also taking down our Grackle tray feeder because they're not allowed to have food anymore since they didn't stay on their feeder and they're still making a mess of our live feeder cam. And again, we actually like Grackles. They're really cool and really smart, but they take over the feeders and other birds can't get to it, so we got to solve that problem. I'm just looking for where they, oh, here it is. Wink. Alrighty. When you're doing a cage dinner bell feeder to keep Grackles out, you want to avoid putting anything in your bottom tray there because they're really smart and crafty. They will kind of stick their heads in halfway and dig food out of the tray. So when you're using the cage for a Grackle proofing reason, just make sure that you don't put any loose food in the bottom and you just stick with the cylinders, or they'll find a way. All right, so that's going to be it for now. We're going to give those caged feeders about 2 weeks, and then we will start adding a few other things back to the mix, and hopefully they will have found a new place to feed. So before I go, bye, I'm going to show you one more time this awesome view because it's so pretty. And then now there's 2 wood storks out there, but I don't think you can zoom in on Facebook Live, so. All right, you guys have an awesome day, and if you have any questions about your own feeding station, feel free to stop by the store or message us or call us anytime. Have a good day.